Good evening, everyone, and welcome. On behalf of the North Bergen Public Library, I would like to thank you all for attending tonight's webinar, which is called Loose Leaf Tea 101. Tonight, we have Amy here with us, the owner of Janam Tea in New York City. And tonight, she will be talking to us about the different teas from India and the benefits of drinking loose leaf tea. You will all be muted during the program, so don't worry, everybody's muted. But if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat or the Q&A box. And I'll be checking them throughout the program, and I'll stop Amy. Maybe she can, answer some of the questions. And without further ado, thank you all again for joining us, and welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thanks to the North Bergen Public Library for having me this evening, and thanks to all of you for tuning in to learn a little bit more about loose leaf tea. So before I get started, I would like to introduce myself. I am Amy Dubin. I am the owner of Janam Tea. Janam Tea is a company unlike any other in North America. My specialty is only single estate loose leaf teas from India. So what does that mean? That means that the teas come from a very specific farm, and they're farm to table teas. I bring them directly over, fresh and unblended, unflavored. I don't do bubble tea. I don't do masala chai. I don't do tea from any other country. These are teas specifically from India and only farm to table. Why do I do that? Why do I focus on just those things? In our country, we do have a lot of what people think of as different teas available. But largely speaking, the US really hasn't gotten very high quality tea. It's average to low, honestly. And so flavoring has become really important. You've got your peach iced tea, your raspberry this, your mint that. And it's because the tea itself doesn't have a lot of flavor. So I wanted to start a company to showcase what tea can be. And it changes seasonally. It's always different. And one of the great things about flavoring tea is that every single time you go to make that tea, it's going to taste exactly the way you remember. It'll be the same every time. But tea is an agricultural product. Every year is not the same, just like wine. It doesn't taste the same, even from the same garden made by the same people in the spring versus the fall, in a mountain area or the plains. That wine is going to taste drastically different. And people are excited about that seasonality. They're excited about that tea from a specific garden, which is a little bit different than just a house red, which might be a blend of wines from many different places. And so you can think of me as somebody who knows a lot about single estate tea and a lot about blended teas. But my company, in my company, I've chosen to really specifically focus on the best stuff. So I've been in Indian tea 18 years. I opened the first tea shop in the Western Hemisphere, specifically for Indian tea, 17 years ago. I've been running for the last 4 years the only tea room in North America for single origin tea as an afternoon tea room versus a tea shop. A tea room and tea shop, two totally different things. And I am also have the unique designation of being the first American in history to be invited by the Indian government to represent the whole of the Indian tea industry on a global stage in India. So any question you have about tea, where it comes from, how it's made, about India, what it's like, I would love to hear your questions, and we're going to take as many as we can at the end. So I would like to start tonight's session by sharing with you a few things about what tea is and what it isn't. Tea is a very specific plant, and just like every living thing, it falls under a scientific category. It is part of the Camellia family, and Sinensis is the name of the order. And under that order, there's actually two types of tea grown in India: Chinary, which is indigenous to China, and Assamica, which is indigenous to India. So we're going to get into that in a little bit more. But the thing to really take away is that if you are drinking something that is not Camellia sinensis, it is not tea. Ginger is a root, and it's a wonderful root. It's so delicious and good for you. It's not tea. Peppermint, it's energizing, it wakes you up. It's an herb. It's not tea. Rose petals or lavender, so aromatic and so pretty, but they're not teas. The reason that people get a little confused by it is because in our English language, to kind of break it up a little bit, you can say, oh, I'll make a tea of that, meaning I will brew it. I will make a tea means like a process, like I will make a tea. But tea itself is an object. It's a specific plant. Camellia sinensis is tea. So to identify it, you'll look for white tea, green tea, oolong, black tea, pu'er, matcha. All of these different styles are actually made from tea leaves. Now, these tea leaves can have additives. You could have, say, a jasmine green. Well, how does that happen? You could take jasmine flowers and mix them with green tea. That's a jasmine green. You can take the oil from jasmine, like a little bit of an essential oil, and mix that with tea leaves, and that's also a jasmine green. You can come up with a synthetic jasmine-like aroma and put that in a tumbler with little flavor balls that kind of look like mini styrofoam balls, and it absorbs the scent, it absorbs the flavor, and you can mix that with tea, and that is also marketed as something like jasmine tea if that's the flavor. So this was a revelation to me. I grew up in Ohio. I did not grow up with tea. First time I saw someone putting milk in their tea, I was probably in high school. So for me, I followed the curiosity of like, well, what is it? Where does it come from? Like, why does it look this way? Why does it smell this way? How do you make it? All those practical things. And one of the first things I did was I started just getting tea bags from everywhere. And those little flavor things I discovered in Dunkin' Donuts Earl Grey. I ripped open the tea bag and I dumped it out, and there's black, what looked like powder, and these little white balls that have the scent added to them. And I just wanted to know more. So in 2002, my second time in India, I decided to spend half a year in India studying tea from all over the country. I just, old-fashioned style, just picked up the phone and called people and said, hi, I'm Amy. I'm here in India. I'm curious about tea. Can I please come see what you do? And I had a lot of people open their doors and their fields and their factories and their hearts to me. And that's one of the reasons I started falling in love with Indian tea. The more I learned about it, the more I just loved it. So to go back for a second to what tea is and what it isn't, it is Camellia sinensis, but in this plant, like I said, green tea and black tea come from this plant. A lot of people don't know that green tea and black tea is the same stuff. Same exact tea leaf. So tea is grown on gardens that are very vast, just like wine is grown on gardens. And a tea plant is actually pruned a lot like a bonsai. So imagine growing it from seed takes 3 to 5 years to produce a flavory leaf that can be harvested to make tea. The branches are pruned routinely, and what ends up when enough tea is planted together, it looks like a green carpet as far as your eye can see, all of it maintained by hand, all of it maintained by machete, every tea is like a bonsai, and just the youngest shoots from this plant are picked to make tea. The darker color ones, you need those for photosynthesis and nutrients. It makes very bitter and brackish tea. Really, you're going to get the best tea from the youngest leaves. So then what is tea, right? Then if peppermint and chamomile and whatever ginger aren't teas, and we can get all these different kinds of tea from the same plant, it starts getting really interesting. Then what does it mean? So the tea, when it comes into the factory, if it's dried right away, that's what white tea is. That's it. It's picked and dried. So you get very little color. There's nothing added to it. It's just the youngest shoots of the tea plant, picked at specific times a year, dried. That's white tea. Green tea is made by bringing the leaves into the factory. They're rested, and they start like a gentle roll in like a kind of a tumbler. Like think of like a dryer in your house, but it's steam. And so then it's steamed and it's rolled and it's steamed and it's rolled and steamed and it's rolled 3 times, and then it's dried. So when you get tea from India specifically, it's pretty unusual to get green tea from India at all. That it tastes like anything is a miracle. And if it tastes good, you just got gold. It's very unusual to find green tea from India, but it's there and growing in popularity. Oolong is a process that's between green and black. So I'll just explain that by explaining what black tea is. So when you pick those tea leaves off the plant, it looks green, like a bonsai, right? It looks like little bright green leaves. And as they're rested, and once they're cut or rolled, imagine like an aloe plant. It's really juicy inside, right? But the exterior leaf is dry. When you crack open that aloe plant, it's all like juicy. And now that juice is exposed to oxygen in the air. Same thing with tea. So when you cut it or you twist it, almost like you're twisting water out of a rag, that juice is now exposed to oxygen and it starts turning brown, just like an apple. Cut an apple, turns brown. Cut an avocado, turns brown. Leave a banana out, it turns brown. That's oxidation. Oxidation and fermentation are totally different. Fermentation is aging. You're fermenting. Oxidation is just the process of turning something a color because it's exposed to oxygen in the air. So to make black tea, the leaves are fully oxidized until they're as dark as they can be. So if that process, it's an enzymatic process, a little plant biology for you, but if that process is stopped halfway, just like squeezing lemon on an avocado, you're stopping that enzymatic process between green and black. That's oolong. Oolong's not a place, it's not a flavor, it's a style. And the style of oolong, you'll never really get two that look the same. Some will look a little more green, some will look a little more tan. They're both correct. It just depends on the type of leaf and the atmosphere and many other factors. But the most important thing to know is oolong is a process between green tea and black tea. And then black tea, this is where it gets a little fun. Black tea in India has 2 different main styles. Orthodox, which just like anything means traditional. And traditionally, when tea leaves were picked back in the way before times, they were rolled by hand. And in fact, in some of the specialty areas that are making tea, they scoop up the tea leaves and they still roll them by hand. And that's to break the cells of the leaf and expose it to oxygen so it starts turning color. There's also machines that mimic the action of hand rolling. So when you say, oh, this tea's been processed by machine, these are 150-year-old machines. These are really delicate. The pressure and the amount of roll and the length of time it's in there, all this depends on the skill of the manufacturer. So don't be confused about sort of machine-made teas and that they're somehow less than all handmade teas. It's just not the case. It just depends on, we're talking about a rolling machine. So you can have very, very fine quality teas come out of a rolling machine. The other style opposite of CTC, of Orthodox, is called CTC. This stands for crush, tear, and curl. Crush, tear, and curl. And so what happens, the tea comes from the garden, it's left to rest, and then it's put into a hopper that almost looks like a meat grinder, like a gigantic meat grinder. And the leaf goes in there, And the rotor vane, that's what it's called, the rotor vane spins up and it cuts the leaf into what looks like little, it almost looks like dehydrated coffee, sometimes as small as dust, which is actually a technical grade. The smallest grade of tea is called dust. There's no, shouldn't be, dust in it. These are just particles of tea leaf that are so tiny. So CTC has a lot of body. You get a lot of color because when that leaf is cut, you now have all the surface area exposed to oxygen, right? It starts turning color really fast. And when you cut the tea leaves, you're condensing it. Think of like a pound of sand, which should take up this much volume, versus a pound of feathers, which might take up this much volume, right? Still the same weight, but very different volume. With CTC, you have much lower volume. It's more condensed. So when you use a teaspoon of tea, you're actually using more tea than you are with the orthodox style, which has lots of airspace in between each of the leaves. So that's what ends up making its way into your handy dandy tea bag. This is CTC, and I'm just going to show you a couple things about it. One thing is that you can see there's just about a scant teaspoon. It's a little hard to see, in fairness, but there's about a scant teaspoon of tea here. And if you just rip open your tea bags, and anybody can do this at home. I'm gonna get a spoon so you can kind of see me pouring it here. You see how it pours out and it looks like these little granules. This is CTC style. And the reason that this is made and to get that dark color is because of when people want what they determine a strong tea, this is what they're talking about. This gives you a lot of body. You can put milk in this. You can put sugar, spices. You can put, you almost can't ruin it. The thing is that it doesn't have a lot of flavor on its own. And this style can be malty, can be chocolatey. It can have a aroma, but just because it's dark in color doesn't mean it's going to taste like anything. So color with tea and flavor, the volume of flavor, are unrelated. If any of you have ever had a vinho verde, a Portuguese white wine, sometimes it's so light it looks like water, but you take a sip and you're like, whoa. Or something like a Guinness, which is a really thick, dark beer. It's surprisingly mild. The volume of flavor and the volume of color, unrelated. So when people tell me, oh, I love strong tea, I literally don't know what they're talking about. Do you mean strong in color? Do you mean strong in flavor? Because those are two totally different things. You can have a very light tea that's so perfumey and so aromatic, it'll just blow your mind. And you can have something like this, which makes a pretty dark cup of tea that literally tastes like nothing. And that's why we have so many flavored teas in the US. And we have so many tea bags, is that they're able to sort of hide these manufacturing techniques so that all you are left with is like the style of tea that you expect to see in your cup. So one thing about loose leaf tea is that any tea, even if it's in a tea bag, you can make this as loose leaf. Yes, if it's really fine like this, and this is super duper, these little pieces are really, really fine, you're going to want to put something like this in a paper filter. And you may be able to find those at the grocery store. There's, there's paper filters online on Amazon. They're really easy to come by. So if you get loose leaf tea of any kind, you can always put it in a paper filter. The challenge is, when you've got longer leaf tea, the reason people drink it is because there's more flavor, in theory. Long leaf teas are made to unfurl slowly so that when you put the tea in the water, the heat unfurls it and releases all those like essential, delightful flavors into your water. And so what happens is you're going to get more layers of flavor. You might start tasting things like, oh, that kind of tastes a little like vanilla. Oh, that's a little like hazelnut. Oh, actually, I taste caramel. And you start having the ability to really rifle through your mental Rolodex of life experiences to remember certain aromas and certain flavors. How many times have you maybe even had a perfume where you smelled it and you're like, oh yeah, that's my second grade teacher's perfume. Like, you know it, you just go right, your brain goes right to that scent. And with orthodox long leaf teas, loose leaf teas, you are more inclined to get those kinds of experiences, to get those subtle nuances, and to get more pleasure out of being able to smell and remember those memories. So why is that valuable? Well, it's valuable because a lot of people don't realize that you were born with about 10,000 taste buds that regenerate every couple of weeks. I have tea everywhere. And as you age, just like you kind of get older and you don't see so well, you need to get glasses. You're a senior citizen, maybe you have hearing aids. Guess what? You actually don't get to taste as well as you did when you were younger. That 10,000 taste bud range over time, as your taste buds regenerate every couple of weeks, slows down. And the average adult has about 4,000. And unfortunately, if you're older or through genetics, you may have less than that. So whatever you're able to taste today and experience today, you won't always have. It's not a given that nature will have endowed you with your sense of taste and smell for the rest of your life. You're lucky if it does, but chances are it's going to get a little more muted. So it's great to appreciate what you have now while you have it. And that's, I think, really the beauty of drinking loose leaf tea, and just tea in general, is it really brings you into the present. So you're able to smell it and look at it and taste it and feel that first sip, and you're like, that first sip that just like relaxes you. So I think that there's a lot of value in having a better understanding of what you drink. And it's because there are a lot of people who are interested in health and drinking tea for their health. So if tea, actually Camellia sinensis, has been shown to say reduce blood pressure. Okay, I'm just going to make up a random thing. Reduce blood pressure. If you drink peppermint, you think that that's what is going to happen. You're like, oh, I'm drinking tea, it's good for my blood pressure, because it says peppermint tea on the front, and you think that it's tea. But it's a totally different chemical component. I mean, tea is its own plant. And so I do think it's a little unfair that in our society that consumers are confused about what is tea, what is not tea, how can you get the health benefits of tea, how do you even know what you're buying, how do you know the value of it? Should you be paying $2.50 for 20 tea bags, or should that be $15? And you don't really know the difference. Like, what's the difference between $2 tea and $15 tea? It's just, I think as a consumer, when I'm at the store, especially like in the coffee aisle, love coffee, I'm just like, do I feel like spending $18 on 12 ounces of coffee today, or don't I? And I think the same kind of thing happens with tea, but tea is actually not the same kind of commodity as anything else. Tea is something that where the product itself, the tea, and the experience of having it are inextricable. It's not just tea. It's not just something to shove in your drawer at work or leave in your kitchen cabinet to rot for 10 years. How many people have tea in their cabinet that's there for literally more than 5 years? Probably a lot of people. And so what you want for the purpose of flavor, for increasing your sense of smell and taste, to develop your palate, to enhance the kind of conversations you can have with other people. Just like when you have a really good piece of chocolate cake, you're like, oh my God, this is so good. And you have to try it. And it kind of becomes a whole thing of a mode of communication. When you have better tasting food, better tasting things, you learn a lot about yourself and about other people. And you're drinking fresh tea. A lot of times, just because something is loose leaf, it doesn't mean that it's fresh. It doesn't mean that it tastes good. It just means that it's not in a tea bag. Just in the same way, natural doesn't mean it's going to taste good or better. It just means it was made without chemicals. So I strongly suggest to everyone that you do a little bit of a kitchen audit. Go to your tea cabinet and look and see what you have, and ask yourself a few fun things like, do I drink any of these things? Do I like any of these things? Do I have one kind of tea that is my go-to tea because you know you like it and you don't really want to spend the money to explore different things because it seems kind of pricey? Do you have things in there that were gifts that you hold on to that memory, and you don't want to drink it because it's like, oh, if I drink it, then it'll be gone, and somebody gave that to me as a gift, and it's special, and I really like the tin, and so the actual tea inside of it is actually going to waste. Do you have a lot of tea? Do you have 60 different kinds of tea on your shelf? And then look at how you are handling the tea. Is it in Ziplocs? Ziplocs let a lot of oxygen in, and light and moisture. Those are the three things that degrade tea the fastest. So you never want to store your tea in a Ziploc or the refrigerator or the freezer. Those both bring a lot of condensation. And again, moisture destroys tea. The only time you want moisture with your tea is when you are ready to drink it. And really, I just think that, when you look at your tea shelf and you assess and you say, wow, okay, yeah, maybe that day I only wanted to spend $2.50 or $3 on this box of tea. But then you look on your shelf and you see you've got 40 kinds of tea that are half drunk, half opened. Maybe you've tried one tea bag, and you add up how much all that cost you. You're probably looking at, I would say the average person probably has $50 retail of tea, of different kinds of tea, shoved in their cabinet that they don't even drink. So if you don't eat stale bread and you don't eat stale vegetables, why would you drink stale tea when you don't have to? So a couple tips I have for buying loose leaf tea. When you buy it, it should be a relatively small size. It could even be as much as this size, but you're not going to want to buy a big bulk thing like people buy rice. Why? Because oxygen is another of those things that degrades tea. So if you're using just a little bit every time you open that packet, every time you open it up, you are compromising the integrity of that tea, the way it was designed, the way it was made. And so it's sort of like, I'm going to try to come up with like a good analogy. It's like every time you, maybe you're cooking on the stove, and every time you go to your pot of simmering tomato sauce, you add a little bit of salt and a little bit of salt and a little bit of salt. It's okay for like a little bit. And at some point it's like, it's just gone and you can't fix it. Once you've oversalted a thing, you can't get the salt back out, right? And same thing with tea, is like once you've opened it and once those essences have released into the ether, it's gone. You're never going to make that tea taste any better than the day you open it. That's the best it's ever going to taste, is the day you open it. So if you open your tea the first day you get it and you smell it, deep breath, and you're like, wow, kind of smells like nothing. It's going to taste like nothing. It's going to be like nothing, it's a shame to waste it. And in that case, you should put something in it like fresh mint or a couple slices of fresh ginger, maybe a little honey. Doctor it up. Don't waste tea. But you don't have to do all that if you buy better quality tea in the first place. You're going to look for tea, again, in a size that's not too big. You're going to look for, when you open it and you smell it, it should smell like something pleasant. Like, oh, okay, nice, right? It should have an aroma. The loose leaf, what you're really looking for are leaves that look about the same size. Tea is graded, just like gravel, into different sizes. And so you're going to get really more of a pure flavor from leaves that are about all the same size. And you're going to want to look for, if it's really, really teeny tiny, you're not going to get so much flavor. So about there, yeah. When the leaves are too long, like this long, that means that they've been left on the plant long enough to grow that big. And the bigger they are, there's not more flavor packed into them. It actually degrades. Larger leaves can be a little bit brittle, all like the juice and the excitement that young leaves have, just kind of like young people. As the leaf ages, it loses that the vitality of the flavor. So if you get a tea and it's all like really kind of long leaf like this, to ask when it was made and see if it's fresh and maybe try it. But you're really looking for leaves that are that size to that size. Like, what is that? Like a 1/4 inch to like 3/4 of an inch. And this is probably like 2 inches or so. It's just a little big. So when you brew the tea, it might get bitter. So that brings me to my next point. How can you tell you've got a good quality loose leaf tea? When you brew it, one of the things you're going to want to look for is color. Now, this is the same tea bag that I made before. It looks like coffee. It's really, really dark. And it looks kind of dull. It doesn't have much of a sheen. It doesn't look alive. That's something you want to see. It should look bright. It should look vibrant. You shouldn't look into your teacup and just see, meh. It shouldn't look murky. It shouldn't look like dishwater. It shouldn't look unappealing. It should look alive. And when you smell it, you want to take a really long, slow inhale on that, and see if you can detect a volume of flavor. If it smells like nothing and it looks kind of dull, my expectation is that it wouldn't be a high quality tea, that it could be average, it could be somewhere in the mid zone, but I can see from across the room whether or not a tea was made by quality hands. I can't tell if it's going to taste good just by looking at it, because it can look beautiful and taste like nothing. Again, the color and aroma and flavor, all unrelated. I can't eyeball something from across the room and say that is going to taste like XYZ. It's impossible. But I can tell you if it was made in a quality way. I can tell you if it's orthodox or CTC. I can just tell you if it's a low quality tea. I can tell you whether or not I'd be inclined to drink it. I can tell you if it's something you could put milk and sugar in. There's a lot you can tell when you look at your tea, almost like a scientist. What does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? What do the tea leaves look like? What do they smell like? What does and I kind of saved this, it's not that attractive, sorry, but the brewed tea, what does it smell like? All of these factors go into designing the flavor of tea. So the main takeaway for you tonight is that loose leaf tea is from Camellia sinensis. You can have loose leaf CTC. Just because it's CTC and it can fit in a tea bag doesn't mean that all loose leaf tea or all tea bag tea is CTC and that it doesn't exist otherwise. It does. You can have loose leaf tea that's CTC, that's orthodox, that's green tea, that's white tea, and you're looking for those quality benchmarks. How do you even make loose leaf tea? Where do you even start with that? A lot of people ask me. You do not necessarily need special equipment to make loose leaf tea. You need a cup, you need water, and you need a teaspoon of tea, or like a 2-finger pinch of tea. And that's it. Because when the leaves absorb water and they start to unfurl, they sink to the bottom. Like pasta floats to the top when it's done, tea leaves sink. So if they've sunk to the bottom and all of the heavy solids have sunk to the bottom, you can just drink off the top. You don't have to strain it. You don't have to put it in a paper filter. The only reason that we do that is because a lot of studies have shown that Americans don't like sediment in their beverages. When you drink a Coke, there's nothing at the bottom left. When you have a cup of coffee, there might be a couple of like tiny grounds, but not really so much. In Turkey, if you have a Turkish coffee and there's not this much of sediment left at the bottom, it's wrong. And studies have shown Americans just don't understand sediment at the bottom of their cup. And so the tea bag, to make it convenient, also makes a clean cup. But it's truly not necessary. You can just put the tea in the cup, add water, wait 3 minutes, let it, when it's ready to drink, it's cool enough to drink, then you can drink it. So I'd like to dispel the myth that you have to know a lot about tea, that you have to spend so much money, that you have to be really, really fancy, pinky up, which is actually improper, but that it's this complex thing that only very sophisticated people know. No, it's just put the tea in the cup and cover it with boiling water if it's black tea, and wait 3 minutes and it's done. So you can have really fine tea that is a good value, that is fresh, that tastes great, that looks beautiful, that's easy to make. The initial purchase might seem a little bit higher than your normal grocery store thing, but you're paying for the convenience of those tea bags. If you actually took a box of 20 tea, you're paying $2.99 essentially for 20 teaspoons of tea. It doesn't really map out. So my company, just to kind of share with you like the difference, I sell all of my tea in these beautiful, technically perfect gold packages that are all signed and numbered. And that is because the teas themselves, you can see the label, it comes from a very specific place. So this is from Serenity Tea Estate. It's green tea. It says it was made in, this one was made in second flush of 2020. I'll explain that in a minute. In West Bengal, India, Darjeeling district. This was made especially for me. That means nobody else on the planet will ever have this tea, nor will I ever have it again. So when this tea is gone, this particular one, the Serenity Tea Estate Second Flush 2020, it's gone for the rest of your life. And the seasonality of tea is a really beautiful thing. I don't look to tea to taste the same every single time. I like novelty. I like the discovery. I like tasting new things. I like smelling new smells, reminding me of memories of places and people I've known in the past. There's something really ephemeral about tea. And then I talk about who actually made the tea. Like, who made it? Where did it come from? How did it get made? A tea like this can make 150 cups of tea. And when you've got better quality tea, you can actually reuse the same leaves to steep a second time. So with just a normal tea bag, something like this is a one and done situation. You're not going to get any more flavor or glory out of a tea bag. But with something like loose leaf tea, you actually can. You just take, what I like to do with these is I cut them open and you shake out just eyeball about a teaspoon of tea. You just eyeball it. There's no science to it. The the only science you can really use is eyeballing about a teaspoon, and you put that in a cup. And if it's green tea, after the water boils, you turn it off and you just let that boiling come to a complete stop. It takes three or so minutes, and just let it kind of cool off a little bit before you pour it in. Really fine tea is something you can't dissect down to the atomic level. There's no way that you can say, oh, well, I used 2.5 grams of this tea in 180-degree water, and it was 8 ounces, and I steeped it for 2.5 minutes before I removed it. Okay, is that going to work with the next green tea you have? No, not at all, because that other green tea is going to be a different size. It might be a Chinery type versus a Samaka type. It might be from grown in the mountains versus the plains. It might be from South India versus North India. One size doesn't fit any when it comes to tea. It's all experimentation. So you can't mess it up. As long as you are, tasting and trying, and you find, some general guidelines. Usually green tea, you're going to want to steep for a little less time than black tea, at a slightly cooler water. But I found some white teas take, 6 minutes in fully boiling water. It just really depends on the tea. So as you start exploring the world of tea and loose leaf tea, I encourage you to experiment. You'll never get it wrong. You'll never get it perfect 2 ways the same time. You'll never get the same cup of tea twice, and you'll never get that moment, those memories, that feeling again. So it makes the present so much more powerful. So if you are someone who's into like holistic health things, the idea that tea is visual, and you have to use your olfactory senses and your taste and your touch and the way it and how it sounds, and maybe you have other things, there might be birds chirping or music. You really want to think about the whole experience, the actual cup you're using. Are you using a mug like this one has like a bunch of airplanes on it because my friend used to be in the Air Force? Or is it a fine teacup? Are you sitting at a high table, a low table, a wood table, a marble table? Are you in a big room, a small room, a quiet room, a loud room? All of these things create the cacophony of whole body mind experiences when you have that cup of tea to appreciate. So I would love to open the floor to some questions. I can talk about tea all day, up, day, and sideways. And if someone has a specific question, I can kind of drill a little deeper. I hope all of you at least have learned a little something about tea, and have gotten a bit curious more about Indian tea, and that it's a whole entire world I would love to help you navigate. I do have classes online. I send you tea through the mail, and we just meet on Zoom just like this. I teach a class in palate development for people who actually really want to learn to smell and taste better. It's almost like an art appreciation class. I teach a class in what is Indian tea and why Indian tea is different from Chinese tea or Japanese tea, Kenyan tea, tea from Mozambique. I go into a deep dive into why Indian tea is so fascinating to me. And then I also teach a class just like this, Loose Leaf 101, where it's a 2-hour class. So I go into a little bit more detail about the different types of loose leaf tea, where to get them, how to store them, how to make loose leaf tea for a large party of people, and other key points in making loose leaf tea. I also teach barista. I do barista training. So I go in cafes and I teach baristas and cafe staff how to handle and serve and store tea. And I also teach, I do have an 8-week palate development class on Mastermind. And finally, I do teach professional classes for people who want a career in tea, who might want a tea or coffee shop, or to go into the beverage industry. So with that, I thank you all for listening. And I am here to answer all of your questions.
Hey, Amy, thank you so much. So informative. I learned so much about tea. And stuff that, I've been drinking tea for years, stuff that I never even knew. So this is awesome. We have a bunch of questions actually. One of the first ones that was early on, um, is asking, what is your background in this field? So I think you sort of answered that. Maybe you can go into it for us a little bit more about your 18 years of experience. How did you said you got into tea by going to India, is that right?
I mean, yes, I mean, for sure. I started developing my palate as a teenager. And while I was in college, as an early on in college, there was someone I met who lived above me, who started teaching me about wine. And I thought that was really cool. I had a curious palate as a child, but I actually started taking wine tasting classes. Because back in those days you could when you were a teenager. But and so he ended up moving on to start a whiskey company. He has been in blending whiskeys for over 20 years. And so I I started learning about the different flavor profiles in whiskey. And whiskey and cigars go together very well. Cigars and tea are very, very closely related, way more closely related than coffee. And I just started getting interested in all of these things. So by the time I went to India for the first time with a friend of mine in 98, I was just going for fun. I didn't intend to make my life in Indian tea, but I saw her grandmother making masala chai and she was putting in the milk. I understood that. The spices, I understood that. She was putting in the basically loose leaf CTC. And I was looking at that. I was like, what is that? Is that a vegetable or like a mineral? I really just didn't understand what that was. And so when I came back from that trip, my curiosity started growing. I would go to Chinatown on the weekends in New York and go to different tea places and buy teas. And I was looking in the Yahoo groups. That was very early on in the Yahoo group time. And it's just studying, going to the library. And I thought, wow, tea is grown in 50 countries around the world. Where do I want to go next? I love to travel, and I'm a very well traveled, lucky lady. And I got a scholarship to study Indonesian in Indonesia in an area that's like surrounded by tea gardens. But this was right after 9/11. And my mother said, oh, no way. Are you going to the largest Muslim country in the world by yourself for a year? Oh, so I said, okay, fine, I'll go back to India. People speak English. It's easy to get around. I hadn't seen the Taj Mahal that first time. And so my curiosity had grown to the point where one day, this is really the pivotal thing, had been flipping through the yellow pages and I saw that there was a Tea Board of India had an office in the Empire State Building. So I went up there and just started asking questions. And over the course of about a year and a half, I visited over and over and over and just to get more and to like read everything I could. And finally, the director there said to me, Amy, you are not going to learn any more about Indian tea from the top of the Empire State Building. You're just going to need to go to India. And, at the time I was turning 30. I'm like, what am I doing with my life? 9/11 just happened. And so I decided to take a half a year self-guided mission to learn about tea in India. And I just went over there. I only had 3 email addresses. And so it was because people were so genuine and hospitable. They showed me around. They invited me to their homes. They invited me to their tea gardens. They invited me to their weddings. It was because of those things I realized I'm never going to own a tea garden and that I have immense privilege to have been privy to all of this information, not just because I mean for many reasons, but sadly the color of my skin in India opened a lot of doors for me. And I realized I was standing in a tea garden. I thought, if I were a different skin color, like literally none of this would be happening right now. None of it. And it upset me so much, honestly, that I thought, well, I have to, what is the best thing I can do with my privilege? What is the best thing that I can do to do good in this world with whatever resources I have available, whatever those resources might be. And so that was one of the reasons I decided to come back to the US and open. I first started online, and then 2005, I opened the first tea shop in the Western Hemisphere, specifically for Indian tea, always with the idea that the more I talk about Indian tea, the more I elevate the value, the more people understand what it is and are interested to maybe even pay a little bit more for fine quality tea, that stimulates the economy over there. It helps people over there. About 3 million people make their living in the tea industry on many different levels, bottom to top. And it's backbreaking to make tea. I mean, imagine like 2 million bonsai plants that you're in charge of overseeing them being like pruned and harvested. I mean, it's insane what people do to make tea. And I couldn't just come back and like not do something with all of what I learned and do something good with it. And so Janam tea, the reason it's called Janam is because it means birth in Hindi. And it's a technical term specific to Indian tea. It's the place on the branch. There's like a little tiny leaf called the Janam. And if you leave it there and you don't pick it, you'll get a new shoot. I mean, tea is just like any plant. Like I've got a jade plant right here, and it has like little branches. This comes from like a little node. This right here on a tea plant, there would have been a leaf there, and that's called the janam. If you pluck it and take it away, you won't get a new node. You get no new tea. If you take the janam, if you leave the janam, you get all the tea. So it's something very specific to Indian tea and specific to my heart. And it talks about what tea is as a substance. Where does it come from? How is it made? How can it taste? How can it be appreciated? And it's the better that I can do, the more I can do things like give scholarships to the young ladies interested to become tea garden managers. Very tough job. To help repair roads after monsoon season. A total nightmare. You have no idea. So all of what I do is has a philanthropic point towards investing in the sustainability of Indian tea for future generations. That tastes great, that looks beautiful, that smells incredible, because it really isn't a given that we will always have Indian tea. We're in the middle of COVID. India is hit by a massive pandemic. And I want to do everything that I can to help my sisters and brothers in tea to continue to make tea, get it to the factory, get it sold, get people paid, and help people on this side of the pond really appreciate it more. So I got into tea because of my curious palate, but I've evolved in tea and stayed in tea because of the good I think I can do with it.
Thank you so much. Such a powerful message, Amy. Thank you. We have a bunch of questions, but I feel like we need like a loose leaf tea 201 to get to all of our questions. But one of the main questions everyone is asking is, where is your shop located? And they also were asking for the website. So I stuck the website in the chat for anyone who wants to know how to get to Janam Tea. And if you want to just talk about why you located it where you did, maybe. A lot of people are asking about that specifically.
Aha, fantastic. So a couple of things. My newest location, which is I've been operating for the past 4 years, the location is on Clinton Street between Houston and Delancey in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And I got that because I was living about a block away 5 years ago and came across the second floor of this location. It's a cocktail bar, a speakeasy style cocktail bar. And they weren't using it during the day. It was sitting there empty until 5 o'clock. And so I gave them this proposal and I said, I would like to run an afternoon tea room out of here. Will you let me do it? In short. And they looked at my background and they saw who I was and they said, yeah, if you think you can make us money, go right ahead. So the New York Tea Room, sadly, isn't open to the public anymore. That is a very recent decision. I have recently married an Indian man, actually from Assam, and we moved to Ohio, Columbus, Ohio. So I'm actually shifting the nature of what I do from being open to the public to being open to private events, corporate events, gifts, custom gifts, gift baskets, party favors, bridal showers, baby showers, team building exercises, and really creating a space where I can combine both the product and the experience in one place. I'll do off-site events. That's I'm in New York right now, actually, for a event at the new One Manhattan Square building, a fancy new condo building that has invited me to do a tea experience for 50 Asian American realtors. And so I'm setting up a table and serving tea for 50 people and having my tea in all their model units. I believe that the best way I can serve my industry is in volume. And so I've really shifted the intention of my current business to group events, group gifts, group experiences, and groups rather than like one or two people at a time. So for people who are interested, it is janamtea.com. And then as soon as you go there, there's a little button that says what we do. And if you click on that, it says everything that we do. You can buy tea online. I have the classes there. I do have a subscription program, and I will be opening my new tea room in Columbus very shortly. But the location in New York City, sadly, is closed, but it's opening doors to new possibilities. The other thing I do is when COVID is not happening, is I lead tours to tea gardens in India. So if you are really interested to kind of do what I did and go with me, I've led tours now. I've been to India 6 times. I've spent almost 2 years of my life in tea gardens in India, and I'm quite dedicated, obviously, to the industry. So if anyone wants to go that far, they absolutely can. But right now, I'm mostly available for staff consulting, corporate gifts, things like that.
Thank you so much, Amy. I'm sure everybody has so many questions, so I think we definitely will schedule another webinar if you're available. Maybe we can talk about the different styles
Sure.
of tea. And if anybody has any suggestions for us, you can always leave them on our website. We share contact us. You can always leave us your suggestions for some additional stuff. And thank you so much, Amy, for joining us tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed themselves, and definitely check out Amy's website if you guys want to know a little bit more about her. Thank you, Nikki said this was fascinating. Fascinating.
Thank you.
And you know what? Maybe we'll see Amy soon back at the library. If you guys want to know more about the library, always follow us on social media. Our handles are usually at NBP Library. And have a great evening, everyone. Maybe everybody needs to go out and make some tea after this.
Yeah, and I'd love to leave you all with one last thought, which is that English breakfast tea is largely Indian tea. You've been drinking Indian tea this whole time. Tea is not grown commercially in England. It never was. So that's a fun fact. You can find me at Janam Tea everywhere, as well as feel free to email me directly. I'm Amy, AMY, at janamtea.com. So happy tea drinking. I would love to come back and see you. And yeah, I hope everyone has a wonderful evening.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks.